Welcome everybody to linuxacademy.com. My name is Terry. In today's course we continue our preparation for the Linux Foundation Certified System Administrator exam. So in our last video we took a brief look at basic shell script setup. How we set up our script to run, how we give it the appropriate permissions, add the script location to our path, and what a script can do in terms of executing commands in a linear fashion. So if we take a look at our scripts directory and we look at the files that we have in there, if we do a cat of our test script.sh, and if you haven't watched this video already, please go back and watch the creation of our script files. We know from our last video that our commands can execute in order, and I could literally put in here 1,000 commands that can now be executed with the execution of one shell script. However, what really adds a lot of power to a particular script is its ability to do what are called conditionals and looping. What's a conditional? Well, a conditional is a test to determine if something is or isn't so. So from a script perspective, an if statement is what you would use to determine if something is or isn't something else. In generic form, if we clear our screen, if I were to type out what it is, I would say if condition, then do something like a command 1, else command 2, and then end the if statement. Now, when I put that into a shell script, the conditions can be anything from testing if a file exists, a directory exists, if a file exists and is a regular file, if it has the SUID or SGID bit set, if it exists and is readable, if it has the sticky bit, if the file exists and isn't empty, if it is empty, if it's writable, executable, equal, not equal, etc. And then I can also test integer values to determine if they're equal, not equal, less than, greater than, or equal. But what does that look like? So let's say I needed to test in my test script whether there was a file or a directory that exists, and then to just indicate whether that directory exists or not. So how would I do that? Let's do a vim on the test script that we have, and we'll go ahead and edit these lines out. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to put at the top of the script a variable called directory. And this variable is what I'm going to actually test against the existence of. So much the same as when I exported my path and added the path of my scripts to the path variable, I'm going to set a value here that I can refer to in shortcut form later. The directory I want to test for is going to be root, scripts, and test. Does this directory exist? So in order to do that, I say if, and then the particular directory that I want to exist, I don't refer to it by the path, I refer to it within a square bracket. Does this directory exist? -d. And the directory I want to find out if it exists is called directory. And the good thing about using a shortcut like this is if I have multiple places where I want to refer to a value, I don't have to fully type it out each time in my script. I can simply define that variable at the top of my script, and then if I make a change to it, I only have to change it in one place, and I don't have to go through, if this were a 1,000-line application or script, I wouldn't have to go through and change it 1,000 times. So much like application programming, if you've been involved, it's like setting a general or a non-specific variable that we can use from within our application. So in this case, I'm saying if this directory exists, then do something. So if this directory exists, and I have to end with my bracket and then a semicolon because it's a single statement, then I want to echo out this directory exists. I don't have to, because this isn't a statement within the script, this is just an echo command. I don't have to end that with a semicolon. Else, echo, this directory does not exist. And then phi. Anytime you run an if command, this conditional requires an opening if and an ending phi. Because bash shell scripting doesn't have brackets around functions, because we're not defining a function, it's a conditional statement, we define the block the same way we begin it, by reversing it. So if and then becomes phi or fi, or however you want to do it. What we're saying is, if this directory exists, tell me it exists. If it doesn't, tell me it doesn't exist. So we'll go ahead and save our file. We can run our test script from here without doing the / because we've added it to our path. And you'll notice we haven't created the directory, and it tells us this directory does not exist without making any changes to the file. So again, if we cat test script out, we're looking for root scripts and test. So without making any changes to the script, if I just make the directory called test and I rerun the command, I can see that this directory now exists. And all we did was rerun the command after creating the directory. So now that we've got the if statement in place, what if we wanted to do something else? If we wanted to iterate through something or loop through something, we can do it the same way. And there are two different ways we can do it. We can use a for loop and we can use a while loop. The difference is a for loop allows you to execute one or more commands for each value in a list, whereas a while loops allows you to execute repetitive commands as long as the control is equal to 0. So we're saying while something equals something, then do this. And as soon as that changes, then it'll stop. Whereas for is a certain number of executions of a command based on a list of objects. So for example, if I wanted to echo out a message a certain number of times, I can set a counter using, it used to be called for next, but the next is now implied. So for example, let's go ahead and edit in our test script. So if we do a test script.sh, underneath of our example for the directory, we can create a for loop that says for I, or let's just do for count in, and then we're going to give it a certain set of numbers. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm basically going to say for each count within the values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I want it to do something, and I want it to echo out, this is line number, and then pick the count variable up. At the end of that, I do done. So I'm saying for count in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, echo out, this is line number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm now done. So it'll step through and echo out 5 lines that this is line number 1 through 5. So let's end this, and we do a test script.sh. It tells me the directory exists, which is the first statement, the if statement, and then it goes through and tells me this is line number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Because I said for each time that I iterate through one of the 5 numbers in that group of numbers 1 through 5, then echo out this command and then be done. So now I've got control over when something completes without having to do a test. I'm just going to iterate 5 times and exit out, regardless of what any values are. However, if I need to do a test that says, hey, I want you to do this while a certain condition is true and only until that condition is no longer true, then I would use a while statement. Since what I want to do now is I want to only execute a command if there's something to execute it on without knowing exactly how many of those items I need to execute on, I need something that's called a conditional loop. In other words, while something remains true, then do something with it. And that's done through a while loop. The difference between, again, the for loop is I know the number of times it's going to execute. With a while loop, I may not know the number of times it's going to execute, but it will execute as long as whatever condition I provide is true. So let's create a file. We're going to create a file called myhosts. So vim myhosts. And this is just going to be a couple of IPs that we may want to ping, and these could be any IPs that we want. These are the public DNS servers for Google. Now I want to run from within my script, I want to ping 3 times each of those hosts, if I can, in order in the script in which they appear by reading the myhost file. I can do that by editing my test scripts file, and underneath of my for statement, I'm going to create a while. So while I'm going to read in the host, which is just a variable that I'm setting, and in fact, let's go ahead and make it capital. I want you to do a ping 3 counts on the host that I have, and then I want you to read the myhosts file. So that's how I'm going to populate the host variable, by piping in myhosts to the while loop. So I have to do while semicolon do a ping minus C 3 times to the host that I get by reading in the myhost file. So if I exit this and I do a test script, then I get the line exists, the first ping, the second ping, and then I get information about ping usage. But I was able to create a script that tests for a directory, so it's using a conditional statement execution, whether the directory exists or it doesn't. It executes one of 2 branches of code. It executes a for block, which counts the number of lines in a large number of numbers that I provide. And then it reads a file called myhosts and executes a command until there are no more hosts within the file to execute on. So in other words, while I get in a value for the host, then I want you to execute this particular command. As soon as that command for host can't be executed on something because it's read all of the values, then exit the shell script. Now, all of these commands can be embedded in each other so that they execute only under certain conditions. So the easiest way to take a look at that, for example, would be, let's take a look at this. Let's vim on testscript.sh, and we could say, rather than this directory exists, we could say, let's say that if it exists, then I want you to do for count in 1, 2, 3, and then echo directory exists line number, and then we have to say count. Now remember, when we do the for count, we have to do the do right afterwards. Otherwise we will get an error. So do, and then the echo, and then the done. So we're only going to execute this particular one if that directory exists. So now we can edit this out. And in this else statement, let's say that what we want to do is we want to say while read host do ping minus C1, we'll just do it once on the host, and done myhosts. So now what I've done is I've taken these control structures and I've embedded different ones inside of a conditional. So I've got a for loop if the directory exists. I've got a ping loop reading a host file if it doesn't. So how does this work? Let's clear our screen and we'll do a my script or a test script.sh. The directory exists, and then the line. If I remove the directory test and I re-execute the command, then I get the ping for the 2 IP addresses that we set it up for. So you can see that the if command or the if conditional determined which of the loop types that we executed, whether it was the for loop or whether it was the while loop, depending on the existence of that particular directory. And you can do that for a service, you can do that for a file, you can do that for integer variables. You can see how complex and powerful a shell script can be. And this particular video is only covering the tip of the iceberg in terms of how powerful your scripts can be. This should be enough for you to begin experimenting so that when you're presented with a script, you have a basic idea with what it's doing, because of these are the major control structures that you'll run into, particularly on the Linux Foundation Certified System Administration exam, is how to construct your bash shell scripts and how to do basic conditionals and structure of your shell scripts. That's all there is for the conditionals and looping inside of bash shell scripting. My name is Terry for Linux Academy.